Hello, friends. Good afternoon.
Hello, hello.
How are you
I kind of
guys?
need I kind of need Max up here because I wanted to just, race through our new features.
What's up?
Hey, hey.
It's Max.
Me.
Hey.
I'm real.
The real Max. The one and only
Yeah.
Spider Max.
Yeah. I got my first spider in my apartment the other day, so I'm attracting them, my own kind.
That is very exciting.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think I am recording. Yes. Okay. Um, well, we haven't been particularly good at drumming up folks into our community hour. So I think today we'll probably keep it a little bit shorter. From an agenda point of view. I think, since we're all here, I figure we may as well go over all the things that mainly I want to say Max has worked on and got merged more recently from a feature perspective. So we may as well use it, to catch up on that. And then the other thing that I'd like everybody to do is we actually have a new community server, a Runme specific one. And it's about time that everybody joins that one. So let's see. So if you guys want to hop over to runme.dev, right? And then I guess it's also here. Let's try this. Yes. So if you hit the join our community button up here, right? And I'm also going to copy the link into the chat, so if you don't, so you don't have to, but feel free to. And that should drop you right into our, brand new Runme community Discord server. How do I over here? Here we go. And I think going forward, we probably want to, have all sorts of Runme related conversations over there. We want to recruit actual Runme users into it, right? So maybe for you, Bencho, since I know you will be doing a talk sometime soon, please use this link here, right? Like it's literally the one from the runme.dev website. It's already updated. And that'll get us into a brand new Discord server, right? So when you invite people, or like when anybody invites people, I think we want to make a point about welcoming them and go a little bit more for actual Runme users that have questions about it, even if we start small, right? So I want to say, obviously, I don't like talking about quality or quantity when it comes to people, but smaller, higher quality, higher bandwidth interactions, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say. Cool. So yeah, let's see. It was already over there. Oh, Devon already is there. Nice. Okay. Cool. So that's one agenda item. The other one that I quickly wanted to cover is I just had a conversation with Liz about this, that we do want to change the format of this meeting to be shorter. So it's going to be 30 minutes, right? And we're going to do it monthly, right? And I think from a format point of view, it'll be hosted in the Runme Discord, right? And by doing it less frequently and doing it shorter, I think we can also pay more attention to actually drumming up, invites and signups and all that. And Liz will be hosting, so yay! um, I can't say I've been doing a good job, other than like sitting here and talking, before. Cool. Let's see. So we'll make sure that we change the community page and all that sort of stuff, the event page to reflect that. Um, cool. Well, then, other than that, let's jump right in. One thing that I need to do is I did take some notes, but Max, please, if I forget something, please remind me. But like what I have on my list here as new features that recently got merged and actually dropped in 1.3 in the extension today. The ones that I have on here is like the option on the cell to toggle whether or not it should prompt you for completing environment variables, when you export them. The next one that's a little bit more meaty is multiple outputs per cell. So instead of like, we'll go through those actually, showing them off. Let me actually turn my screen share off. Without like what we'll do is instead of replacing the terminal output or like the cell output, sorry, we will just add it to it. So you can have multiple cell outputs on it. It's a little confusing at first, but when I show you, it'll hopefully make more sense. Then two more things, a little smaller. We cleaned up the settings, like we removed some stuff that like, let's see if we can invite Devon up here. Sorry, didn't mean to suppress you. Yeah, we cleaned up the settings, so we removed some that were obsolete and renamed some that just kind of like semantically have changed in meaning. And the last one that I have on here for the extension is the way we now drop the Runme binary into your path has changed too. It's a little bit more subtle. It might have some side effects. We'll probably talk about that real quick. And then outside of extension stuff, we'll quickly take a look at the Runme action, the Runme GitHub action. Anything I'm missing, Max? You can just nod.
That sounds about sorry.
No, that's fine. I just saw that you were
okay. That's right. Yeah, it sounds about right overall. There were a lot of bug fixes too. Is kind of what comes to mind, but that's pretty much the big highlights for sure.
Right. Yeah, like I sort of focused on the more feature ish stuff. Okay. Maybe I'll just run through it. Let's start with the prompt for environment variables. So one of the things that is really helpful is the ability to prompt the user to complete an environment variable. Like anything from like a directory to like a API key to whatever it is, you can put in here, right? We will essentially like Runme will detect that you're exporting a environment variable, and then it will prompt you to complete it, as you can see here. This is the default behavior, and that works well in a lot of cases. I have personally found myself trying to put together a Runme notebook, and where I wanted to export environment variables that I intentionally did not want the user to complete, right? And scenarios are kind of like the ones where you want to read something into, or like where you want to populate an environment variable to hold some temporary state, or kind of like decompose a really long line of shell script. And excuse me, I guess I can show that down here somewhere. Where is it? Well, actually, without necessarily like contextualizing it too much, what this new configuration option will do is when you untick it, and I hope this works now, it will just run. So instead of what will happen when this is ticked, it will ask you, right? It will just ignore that, right? And there are scenarios where, especially if you're not modifying your README, if you're like using a README file, which we oftentimes do, if you don't want to modify it too much, there are oftentimes scenarios where this is being used just for clarity, not necessarily for a user to complete, right? But this gives you the ability to like essentially do both. Just as a quick reminder, while we added, there's also a difference between quoting a value versus not, right? If you don't use the quotes, it will turn into a prompt instead of a placeholder value. So I need to turn this back on. And as you can see now, this is no longer a default value. It says foobar in here, right? And I can type in foobar. But the real idea here is to say like, type your foo token, right? And that becomes a prompt, right? Anyways, that's pretty cool stuff. So that's available in the new version. As you can kind of tell here now, I mean, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I may as well. We actually like have two outputs now. So two outputs here being the actual output of the cell, and then sort of the meta output, which is the configuration panel, right? So instead of in the past, I think what happened was when you hit the configuration button, it will overwrite, like your terminal state, right? So the terminal would disappear, and in its place, this configuration panel would show up. Now we're essentially doing both, and you explicitly have to close it, right? One thing that we have on our list, and we'll probably get to that sometime soon, is like a little bit of like cosmetic fixes. Like we want to have a little X up here just to make it more apparent, how you can close it, right? But like hitting the configuration button will do that too, just to kind of drive the point home. Let me maybe disable this. When you now run the cell, both of those outputs will reappear, right? So that's essentially what this multiple output scenario looks like. There's also a world, and we haven't really fully explored that yet, where you could conceivably think about having even like multiple cell outputs, if that's so what makes sense. I could see a scenario, and we haven't really tackled that yet, where if you execute it multiple times instead of replacing it, you would actually just append it. But that's something that we need to figure out if there are use cases for. So let me quickly switch back. Just feel free to interrupt me, right, if there are any questions, because I got my eyes on my screen. Cool. So the cleaned up settings is essentially, it's pretty straightforward. It's you go into your, not the JSON settings. I actually don't know. Oh yeah, here, settings UI. You open your settings. You can kind of scope it down to only the Runme extension. This nice syntax here. And we have 18 different options. Now I hope I'm not fumbling this one because I didn't take notes of which ones have changed. But I do remember that we primarily removed some. You might remember this or not, but there used to be a way of changing the default behavior of these configuration options here. So basically, if you have a new cell, which ones are ticked by default? We removed that, and the reason why that is because we do have the ability to do that on a cell by a cell basis, and it was more important to us that the README runs the exact same way if you check it out in multiple places, right? Different computers, different people, different machines, and if you start changing the defaults, then that is no longer deterministic, right? So we removed that. Another one is the custom server address. So now that with this kernel architecture, we do have a pairing of like a VS Code window and a Runme server that is sort of hosting the kernel. They start up at launch of the window, but there are scenarios, and these are primarily, I would imagine, right now, development and maybe debugging, where instead of you want to have an auto assignment, an auto launch of a server, you want to be able to just point your VS Code, your extension at a server that's running out of band, right? So you could imagine, like unticking this here and then saying like running it in another window, right? This used to be a little bit more cryptic, but it now actually says what it does. Did I explain this right, Max? Cool. Awesome. All right. And the last one on here is like a little bit of a ergonomics thing. Let me maybe close this. So we now, have this interplay with the CLI, which is something that we introduced with the version 1 release. And when you click on it, it will run the same exact cell, but it will be hosted in terminal, not in the notebook experience. And the one change that we've done is essentially when you now run which runme to figure out where the binary is being located that is being run by default, essentially like looking inside of your path definition, we auto-populate that. And the way that works is like the extension will add the path. And in this case, I guess I don't know why it's this one. Oh, okay, because we prepended, not appended, right? Prepend, appended, sorry. We put it in the path, like farther, like at the end of it, right? Not in front. So essentially what's happening is like the way the VS Code extension API lets you modify the path on a user's machine is you can only add to it at the end. You cannot get in front of it. So if there's any Runme binary that's already in the path, that will take precedence. So you kind of have to be careful that you're not running like different versions, especially if your version is behind. In this case, it looks actually like I'm behind because I think we are on. No, actually, this is right. 1.1 is on the CLI is right. But if I, for example, just to kind of make this more clear, uninstall, I installed Runme as a node package, which is something you can do. You just uninstall it and then go back here. Yes. So now essentially what's happening is like I removed the entry from my path, right, from my machine's path by the virtue of uninstalling the runme binary that I installed through npm. And as it runs through the search path, it will actually hit the one that we added at the end of it, right, through the extension API. So what that will do is essentially it just makes it so that we don't have to pass in the full path, right? And inside of here, you basically don't have to worry about like where the binary lives, and it's automatically being put into your path, right? Again, there is sort of the side effect of like you have to be careful if you install Runme through Homebrew or through npm, specifically if you're like behind on versions, right? Because the CLI will take precedence depending on where it sits in the path, right? But at the end of the day, we think the user experience is nicer because like in here, you really only get the minimum amount of, I mean, minimum is quite a bit, and we're also working on changing that, but have a concise command, right? Not the full path. So that's like more or less a minor detail, but there's a couple of like corner cases to look out for. The other thing to get ahead of that is like the way you install your runme binary. I usually use Homebrew, but I uninstalled it to make this point here. Is just make sure you update your dependencies regularly, right? That's good for security hygiene in the first place, and it also makes it so that you're not getting out of sync. Anything else on the extension? Or like Max, do you have any remarks you want to add?
Yeah, only thing is that terminal button is a bit different than what it used to be. It can now, it's like a fold out thing. Before it would just open it.
Oh, right,
But it's a
right.
toggle now.
Correct. Sorry, I forgot that. Yeah. So just like the configuration panel, there is sort of like what do you call a persistent state now, right? So you'll see that I ran this cell, and when you now hit the terminal button, it'll collapse or it'll remove it, and then when you bring it back, it will restore the state, right? So you can think about it, as Max said, like a fold out. Good point. So we also think that like leads to better ergonomics. Cool. Ready to move on to the GitHub action? Alrighty. So the GitHub action, runme action, is essentially fairly new, and the idea behind it is to make it really easy to test your project onboarding experience. And what we mean by that is like, for example, let's go into another repo, runme.dev. Like a standard README file kind of looks like this, right? npm install, npm run, right? And then a third step, which usually, is post-development, which, depending on how this is set up, in this case, we just deploy to Vercel, so Vercel runs that step for us. But there are times when you want to inspect what a production build looks like, right, versus a development build. But the point is like there are basically like three commands here: install, start, and build, that you would have to know about to get this repo up and running, right? So what this action lets you do is like you can just drop it into a workflow, and excuse me, VS Code runme. We're actually not strictly using it in here. I just learned because of the frame buffer, but the idea is to essentially just drop it into your existing workflow that just tests, like unit tests, end-to-end tests, any sort of like testing that you do anytime you commit or you merge. we're currently doing that as well. We're just not using the action here yet, which I'd like to change, and we will change. But the idea is very similar where, let me just search for Runme run. Here we go. We had essentially like runs those steps, right? And in this case, I should have maybe used this as an example. Let me show you. The way to get up and running is slightly different because we do have to account for a npm dependency that comes out of a third party registry. But essentially, what it will do is it'll run these steps based on the markdown definition, right? So we have the contributing MD over here, and if we look at the raw, yeah, the raw, this is not great to look at. Let me maybe open it in here. Contributing MD. So essentially it will run configure npm, right, which is the step right here. If we go on, we can see that step is called configure npm, or we can also just look side by side. That might be easier. Configure npm here. So essentially, like anytime anybody changes either the codes, the README, or like the contributing, the documentation here, or anything that connects the two. In this case, this is a direct npm command, but it could be an npm script, right? It could be a makefile. So anytime anybody makes any changes to, the thing that the user runs, which is very likely either clicking the play button here or a copy and paste, you can test that will still work, right? And so it runs configure npm, and then it just runs it in sequence. It runs setup. Setup is the next step here. What that will do in this particular case is run this here. It pulls in the latest Runme binary, the server in that case, which is a project that's not hosted inside of this repo. And essentially, like, it prepares you to be able to do development. It runs a build that's down here, right? npm run build, but it really just kind of addresses this cell block here, right? And the last step that it takes, it runs, I can actually just run this here just to show you. And I already ran the other steps, so I'm just going to skip them. And we can run the tests against it. Right, and this does a whole end-to-end test thing. And it will even bring up our end-to-end tests running a instance of VS Code. Didn't work. I know why. This always temporarily fails when there's a new release of VS Code, and I think they shipped a recovery release this morning. So there's a thing inside of, there's a reference that they always like update, but it takes some time to propagate. So this is probably why this is failing right now. But it has passed our CI, so I'm not lying. Cool. Any questions on that? Oh, yeah, I guess one thing that I should probably point out a little bit better is in the GitHub action, there's a way to, sorry, this is not the GitHub action, it's over here. There's a way to specify the sequence of those commands. This is sort of like the easy way, like the simplistic way of doing it. You can just literally specify the sequence and it will call them sequentially. We do have a scenario where this doesn't scale if you want to like do something more complex that has more dependencies involved. We actually just dropped a blog post that will go into detail how to use the GitHub action. Right here, first one. So go check that one out. And if this is too simplistic, right, if you have a Kubernetes cluster involved, a service mesh, we did link a more sophisticated case where we're using the BATS library that we previously have talked about, where you can still use the VS Code, the GitHub action, but you actually like write test cases against it, right? And this is for scenarios where you have where you do integration testing, right? So you have like a cluster involved, maybe a service mesh, maybe an app under test, and the ability, or like what this allows you to do is like write assertions that are like more specific than just error code was 0, right? The idea of the GitHub action was to make this a no-brainer here, so we'll execute those steps, and unless any step will return a non-zero exit code, it will just pass, right? So if one of them fails, it will essentially propagate that up and fail the build. So it's more or less binary, right? There are scenarios where that is not sufficient, and in the case of this Linkedy documentation testing example, we wanted to inspect the inner state of a Kubernetes cluster as part of testing the documentation, right? So it's linked in the bottom here because a reader of this blog post has pointed out that not every repo is that simple, and we do agree, but the simple solution here actually works well in a lot of cases. Or at least it gets you started. Right? Cool. I think that's it. Anything else that we should chat about while we're all here? This is being recorded, by the way. Cool. Well, then let's keep it short and sweet today. We'll make the changes as we discussed. We'll make the meeting shorter. I mean, yeah, 30 minutes, including some small talk. Seems about right. And then next time around, Liz will host it. And of course, we will all participate. And we'll make sure that we drum up a couple of people, use our email list. And we will host it on our Runme server. So if you haven't joined already, please do that now. Right. Cool.
And
all
details will be on the both the events and community page on the Runme Dev website. Right.
Awesome. All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Awesome. Bye.
End state.